afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're at. This is Jed Brewer with Study Groups and the Below the Line Club, and excited to have you on the call here today as we talk about strategic design. And Mike Lashy with Paragon Solutions is our guest presenter today, and will be stepping us through everything we need to know about branding, form, and function, and how the three interact, and the importance of having function in addition to having form or prettiness to whatever design we choose. And the branding decision, whichever way we go, can be a costly decision, and it's a very difficult to change decision too once you go with a particular brand or design. And so it's important to get it right. And Mike's an expert in this field. He's worked with several of our study group members and others throughout the industry over time, and many of his designs have won numerous awards throughout the industry. So Mike, really pleased to have you on the call here today, and in just a second I will turn it over to you. For the audience, I have each of you on mute to avoid any background noise that may pop up. So if you do have questions as we go along, we want to make sure we can get those answered for you. In the GoToWebinar framework on your screen, there's a place where you can type in questions. I can see those questions, and I can then relay those to Mike, and we can do our best to answer them throughout the call here today. So Mike, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you and allow you to dive into strategic design.
Cool. Hey, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you. Wish I could be in front of you talking and interacting, but this is the next best thing. Well, technology is a wonderful thing. So, you know, design is obviously one of my favorite things to talk about, and the continuing change in the way we approach design. I've been doing this with Paragon now 31 years. And things are so different than they were, and I'm sure it is for you too. One of the primary things that we see is the competitive marketplace has continued to change. It's ever changing. The recent announcements of Amazon buying Whole Foods kind of, you know, to me it's exciting. It's dynamic. It's what are we going to do about that? How are we going to compete? And so it is more and more important with these huge investments that we have to look at the design of both your new facilities and your existing facilities to refresh, rebrand, relook, and how you compete in the marketplace. So what I'm going to do going forward, I'm going to first start talking about branding design in general. And it's one of those things that I think our industry largely has overlooked. You know, and let me give you an example. When I say 15 minutes or less can save you 15% or more on car insurance, who is it? I would say 99% of you said Geico. If I were to say the ultimate driving machine, what would you say? BMW. You know, brand for them, the brand statement or the brand promise is innate throughout their marketing, throughout their design, throughout everything that they do. And I think in our industry, in our petroleum convenience industry, we're not as intentional in our approach, if that makes sense. So the first question that I want to ask you when it comes to brand is, who are you? You meaning your company. Who are you? And what is your brand promise? And if you come back to me and say, well, we're clean and friendly and generic and blah, 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 that's not a brand promise. You know, go back to the Geico example or the BMW. What is your promise to your customers that separates you from the rest, from the pack? I often use the term purple cow, which describes that unique, purple cow standing in the field amongst brown cows standing out. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Take that question to your next management meeting and ask that question. And what you'll probably get is multiple answers, which is disappointing, because you would think that if you have a brand promise, that brand promise is universal, that brand promise is something that we all agree on, that that brand promise is something that guides us in our process. So the next thing I want to do, is to take the different components within each of your facilities, and I want to create silos. And by that, I mean, I want you to look at the food category, whether you're using franchise food or proprietary food or a combination, which I hope you're doing. If you take that, what is your brand promise? What is your signature? What makes your food program different than all the others? It's an interesting question. I think a lot of people will have trouble answering that. The same for the retail. Are you company operated? Are you dealer operated? Are you a mix of the two? What is your brand promise? If it's the same as everyone else, then you got a problem. And even 7-Eleven, says, "Oh, thank heaven for 7-Eleven," or they have a series of, marketing and branding promises that they make, and that's pretty powerful. So also in the fuel, whether you're continuing to support Major Oil, whether you have your own proprietary brand, whether you're company opt, and taking it all the way down to whether you have dealers, either with your brand, proprietary brand, or Major Oil. These are silos that should all have their own brand promise, but then those brand promises should tie back up to your signature, who you are. It should tie back to the corporate brand promise that you're making to all your customers. And the often forgotten one, to me, is car wash. So there are some franchises out there, but most of us have our own proprietary car wash. And it just amazes me when I go up to these, multi-million-dollar facilities and I look at the car wash. And sure enough, it says car wash on there, which is about as boring and lacking of a brand promise as I could possibly imagine. But I would imagine a number of you are still doing that. You haven't created a brand. You haven't done what it takes to market that and to create a unique brand promise. So with that as kind of the overriding theme of today's talk, I want to give you a couple examples. So I'm going to give you two examples, and we're going to kind of work through these silos, and we're going to work through what was done in these cases and why. Then I think you'll be able to apply that back to your own facilities to a degree. So again, what communicates your unique offering is the signature question here. I'm going to keep coming back to that. So the first example that I want to share is Enmark, a company out of Savannah, Georgia. The original name was Enmark, E-N-M-A-R-K, which means nothing. It was the name that's been around for a long time. And when they wanted to create a new brand promise, when they wanted to create a new approach, the name Enmark was coined, which just adding an ET in this particular case sounds so easy, but it wasn't. And what that does is create an entirely different feel to their presentation. But their brand promise is fresh choices, friendly faces, or their tagline. So how is that communicated? How is that uniquely communicated through? Oftentimes, when I go to see customers, they'll have the name on the front and maybe the name one time inside, but it is not carried through in a consistent way. So in the case of Enmark, our task or our challenge as we created this brand was to carry that through the entire depth and breadth of every way that they communicate. So whether it's their business advantage cards or cash cards, the forecourt, the retail, the car wash, all of these things had to create a specific look or a specific branding, and then it all has to reflect back up to the major brand or the primary brand. When we go into the inside the store, to the retail side, to the food side, you see that we again consistently tried to pull all of those pieces. And this is really just the start of creating a unique promise or a unique brand, is all of these different elements. They've got to be cohesive, they've got to pull together. But now we're going to take a step back and look at the functional design of that. The second example that I'm going to share is Freshies, which is up out of northeast of Maine. Again, they were using the Freshies in their deli And we loved the name and said, boy, why don't we use that name everywhere? So we did. And the net result is that Freshies brand is carried through again in all the various components within the store, from the car wash to the forecourt, to the ice in this case, uniforms, floor mats, just all the individual pieces that have got to be pulled together in that cohesive way. So as we go around those two stores, what we're going to talk about first is the functional design.
So Mike, question here quickly. In the case of Enmarket, what is the brand promise that's being communicated, and then same with Freshies?
Well, I think the fresh was the primary one in the case of Enmarket. Fresh choices, friendly faces is the brand promise. That's their primary. They want that to be on everyone's lips when they think of Enmarket. And Freshies, the great thing about Freshies is I think the name itself creates a brand promise. They're saying that everything that they do is fresh. They've upgraded their food service. They've upgraded their presentation. They've upgraded their employee hiring. I mean, they went right down the line and improved everything to create that Freshies promise. So I think there's a consistency between the two, and yet they're very different because of the locale, because of the size of the facilities that they have, and there's major difference in the Northeast and the Southeast as to the types of food, the demographics, and everything else. But the initial brand promise, I think, is very similar.
Mm-hmm. And then going back to that diagram that you had that showed the different silos. So I'm just thinking, if I'm more of a full line marketer where I've got food, maybe I've got my own company operated retailer, I've got dealers, should I be trying to do a unique brand for each of those segments, or is it better for me to have a consistent brand that can kind of touch them all?
It's an awesome question, and there is no single answer to that, but the process that's going to get you to the correct answer is the same. So take the fuel silo, for example. There's so many variables there. Within your corporate run stores, are you going to do major oil, or are you going to do a proprietary brand? I hate the term unbranded because it's not unbranded. It is a brand. It just happens to be yours. But then the question is, do you want to take that proprietary corporate brand and do you want to pass that off to a dealer network that may or may not have the same integrity that your stores have, that may or may not have the same cleanliness, may or may not, definitely won't have the same brand promise? Or do you want to create a unique third brand for the dealer network to still give them some of that quality look, but it won't negatively impact your brand? So every customer is different in the way they approach it, and few customers have all of these silos. Those that do, I think you need to look at the food different from the retail, different from the fuel, different from the car wash. And yet, as I said early on, they should all be tied together in a single brand promise. They should all be tied together into, who is Enmarket, who is Freshies.
Thank you.
One of my favorite architects is Frank Lloyd Wright. Well, his mentor or his teacher was Louis Sullivan. And he always talked about the term form follows function. And I've used that as, a hallmark in my mind in design from the very beginning. You must first establish what the functional design, how things work, what goes where, before you make it pretty, before you, add the sizzle, so to speak. And yet, I think historically, a lot of people will come in and they'll create whatever the color palette and the graphics and this and that and try and slap it everywhere without really looking at functional design. So here's a slide that'll make your head hurt, but we're not going to go through all of this in this slide, but these are some of the things that we look at in functional design. And so what I'm going to do is take each of these things, like in site, for example, when we look at the site, we look at the ingress, egress, how the retail is positioned, how the fuel is positioned, the parking, the car wash. These are all the things that we look at. And we're creating a look, we're creating a functional flow from the moment they drive onto the site. How is it all working together? So we're going to go through the end market and the Fresh's example and look at the site. And we're going to go through those examples and look at the layout. How was that done? Why was it done? Those kind of things. So the first two things that you see on the left is the functional design elements. And only after you get those two do you start flowing into some of the form design, the interior and the exterior looks and finishes and those kinds of things. So we'll talk about that as well and how that works together. So we're packing a lot of information into a short period of time. Jed said I only have 2.5 hours, so we're going to talk fast and try and use all of that 2.5 hours. So this particular one right here is end market. We probably just lost most everyone when I said 2.5 hours. I was kidding if you didn't.
Yeah, hopefully they realized you were kidding.
Yeah, 10 people just hung up right there. So, you know, the unique thing in our industry is we have all these different sites all over. And so how does it really flow? How does it really work? So I'm going to show in this particular case, it's a very unique site, but we've got a lot of ingress coming in, you know, from here coming right into the throat. You see how everything's working with the forecourt out front. But what we tried to do is really establish a retail look, a retail presence. And we also, if you look at that list, and I know you can't see it right now, but the ingress and egress here, we've separated the diesel from the cars, which is very important. We've queued up the drive-through, and it's not getting in the way of the rest of, you know, the parking, which is critical. The amount of parking is one of the biggest constrictors that we have in our industry. This particular site doesn't have a car wash, but it all has to work together. And so in this case, the primary components were the forecourt, the retail, the drive-through, and the diesel, and how all those things flow together and don't get in each other's way. So it actually came together very, very nicely. Once you go inside, you start looking at a couple key things. You'll notice that we have two primary entrances here. And if you go back to the site, what you'll see is there's a lot of parking over here to facilitate this particular entrance. One of the trends that we see again and again is multiple entrances. So you've got the two entrances for the auto, and you've got a third one for the diesel. That's a lot of flow and a lot of people coming from different angles, and how do you manage that flow? So when we look at the list that was on the things that we analyzed from functional design, we talk about the number of entrances and we talk about the flow. The demand items, aka your coolers, beer cave, and your restrooms. Restrooms is a pretty high demand area, I guess. But that's going to pull all three entrances deep into the store. We're still getting 40% or so out of our walk-in coolers and beer caves. So that's going to be a pull from all three entrances. And the restrooms are universal as well. So you use your demand purchases to pull them deep into the store, and then you try to guide them back through the rest of the store to the things that you want. You know, in this case, we're talking about food service, and End Market was really trying to ramp up the food service component of their offering, and they've done that. The next thing on the list was adjacencies. And so, for example, in this particular case, you've got a beer cave here, and you've got the craft beer right here. We've done a lot of work in beer caves with Miller Coors and a lot of consulting work. One of the things that we found is that there is a direct adjacency between the craft beer and the beer cave. And what I mean by that is if you can put the craft beer on the return trip after your customer comes into the beer cave and he's returning to the checkout, you have a greater percentage chance of impulsing them to buy that additional product. So what we found in the outtakes, and this was all done by Nielsen, so it's not me talking, it's Nielsen doing the studies in the outtakes. They found that, you know, take a typical millennial going in, getting his daily drinkers or his weekend beer, when he goes by that craft beer on the way out, he's already got his daily drinkers for everyone else. Well, he's going to get a little something for himself or herself. And so that was the aha moment coming out of that particular adjacency. That same theory of adjacencies works throughout the store. So creating those adjacencies becomes very important. Creating, the food service look and image and how the checkout works, all very, very important. So in the functional design of this particular store, it really works. You'll notice that about 60% of the total store is devoted to food service. And what we're finding, and I know all of you guys are finding it as well, is the sales per square foot of the typical gondola continues to decrease. The sales per square foot of food service continues to increase. Anything that's fresh, grab and go, continues to increase. And so you really want to play that, and you want to devote the appropriate amount of space to it. The other thing that's happening in this particular store is we do have a full drive-through with a walk-in cooler here, register here, duplicate fountain, coffee, frozen presents. And you see how both the food service flows into the drive-through and the convenience items flow through the drive-through. So what we've tried to do there is reduce steps in the drive-through, reduce the number of steps that each one of those transactions take for that customer service agent. So they're not going from here all the way through over to this cooler door and coming back. No, they're taking 2 steps over to this cooler door. And you can use scan data and technology to anticipate what's going to come, because what you sold last month will probably be duplicated to a large degree. So when we've done drive-throughs like this, we found anywhere from 25 to 40% of the total sales end up going through the drive-through after a period of time, if it's done right. If you make it inconvenient, that number is going to be way lower.
Mike, you've been a big proponent of drive-throughs over time. What situations do drive-throughs work well in and succeed, and versus when they don't?
I would say that one of the primary things that I always look for is return customers, consistent customers. And that means, if it's residential areas, backing it up where you have a lot of repeat customers. So if you're on the interstate, for example, and most of your customers are transient, your drive-through sales will be less than if it was in town or say on the interstate with a lot of residential backup where people are going by every day. The drive-through is, you've got to create the habit, and they're not used to seeing it in convenience stores. So once they get into the habit, then you've got them, because your competitors don't do it. And so the repeat transactions happen again and again. So the number one thing is to have customers that pass by the facility consistently. And you could and should put everything through the drive-through. As soon as you say no to someone that no, that doesn't go through the drive-through, then you've irritated that customer. The only caveat to that is whatever is legally allowed. So in some municipalities, I've seen where beer is not allowed, or lottery because of carding and things like that. But other than that, everything can go through the drive-through.
Does food work well through the drive-through?
Let me ask McDonald's and see if if food works well. I'm being a little glib there, but food service, fast feeders, will take anywhere from 65% to 85% of their sales through the drive-through. And it didn't used to be that way. When they first put a drive-through in their stores, people didn't know what's going on. You're handing us a white bag through a window, and now it's expected. And the more and more we get into food service, the more we're competing directly with a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A or a whoever, the more important it is, because that's where that customer can choose to get something to eat and something to drink. So if they can go down the street and get need something to drink through the drive-through, and they've got to come in your store, get out, come in, it's raining, it's hot, it's cold, it's wet, it's whatever, it's less convenient and it's less preferred. Now, there's ways to overcome it with great food and great service. But what we found is that when you add the drive-through, it actually increases your overall sales. So, for example, we had one case where the drive-through was added to an existing store, and the overall sales went up 12%, and 38% of the sales went through the drive-through. So it's a win-win deal. It's really taking care of more customers that might not want to come there. Maybe it's a lady with 2 kids in the back and she doesn't want to get out. Maybe it's a handicap. Maybe it's just a lazy guy like me that wants to listen to his music and get his cup of coffee in the morning. Whatever, it works.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, in my mind, as food is becoming a greater part of the share of sales and gross profits from a store, drive-thrus are increasingly making sense, notwithstanding the demographic changes and demand for convenience too.
Absolutely, and we've learned so much about drive-thrus, and there's a lot of do's and don'ts. And every one of these topics, I could probably talk the full 45 minutes on, but we're just hitting some highlights here and how it works all together. In the interior, we talk about departmentalizing. We talk about, how do you create the graphics? The days of running a colored band around your store, having white walls and a red band and saying food and fountain and whatever, they're long gone. And so what we're trying to create here is a retail experience. So we've now got the functional design down. Everything's flowing, but you've still got to create a retail experience where people look and are attracted to the various areas within the store. So you'll notice that there's a lot of textures here. There's a lot of different materials, from brick to wood to signature graphics to tile, all working together to create a certain look, like the Moos that you see on the left. Okay, well, that's the yogurt brand. It pulls you to that pink color. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about departments and textures and finishes working together. Graphics can be very powerful, but they shouldn't be graphics everywhere. They really should be a very focused graphic that pops off of whatever the background is. We're getting more and more into specialty lighting and ceiling treatments, and you'll see that in just a minute. So over in the eatery, you see again, this looks like a super high quality fast feeder, and frankly, it is. And that's the look, that's the feel, that's everything that we were trying to do. Right down to the bathrooms. It's all got to work together. We talked about the inside briefly and talked about the exterior briefly, and you can see how some of the components that you saw on the inside, it really starts when you approach that retail space. You see the end market, you see the eatery, those are the 2 primary brands, they're both theirs. But you also see some of the signature colors and some of the signature textures, the use of light. There's a lot of things going on here on this exterior. But the idea of a square box and putting a logo out front, it's just not as effective anymore, because you're competing against, take a McDonald's that's just remodeled all their stores in the last 10 years or 8 to 7 years, whatever it is. Every one of those fast feeders have gone through and rebranded, refreshed, and come up with a lot of cool things. And we need to stay on that level to compete. So
a common question I hear from guys is they feel the need to roll out a brand. They can come up with a slick brand. It looks really good, and it can fit their new builds, well. But they got maybe 20 sites. That some are kiosks and some are smaller. One may be rural, one may be urban. Is there advice on how to wrap everything together when you have a mixed bag of different sites?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we do, one of the strategies that we use is we take a step back once we create a brand, and a lot of times prototyping it on a new store is a good way to start. But then we create brand standards. So we say, okay, on this condition, this is how to use this component. On this condition, this is how to use this component. So you create those brand standards that go across those various size buildings, their various locations. There's flexibility in a brand, but you can adapt it. maybe one of the best examples I could give is Starbucks. You can go into any Starbucks anywhere, and it feels like a Starbucks. But to me, it seems like very few of them are the same. You know, they've used different materials, they've done different things, but the standards are the same. You know, the way that the front counter interacts with the condiments and the way the seating, they've got standards that they don't mess with it. It's exactly the same when you go back to their primary standards, but there's flexibility. So you could see on this one, for example, I could take this brand and put it on a 3,000 square foot building. It won't look exactly like this, but it will have enough of those standard components. You know, you might come in, for example, and have a yellow awning coming over on the left and a gray awning coming over on the right. You might only have one tower instead of two, but you're going to bring in the stone. You're going to bring in, you know, the wood look. You're going to have the logo applied in the correct way. So there's ways to, you know, shrink and expand as needed. But what you don't want to do is give every sign maker and every contractor the permission to mess with your brand. So you create those standards and then you apply them. And we do that all the time.
And then how many sites do you need to have before investing in creating a brand starts to make sense and resonate with customers?
One. You know, we've done single sites, and I can show you them. I could send videos out of single sites where the brand has been created. Technology is so wonderful these days. It's just not that hard to implement unique signage, unique graphics, unique everything. But there's got to be that intentionality of creating the brand and having the look and making it look like there's 20, even if there's only one. And the results are there. The responses from the customers are there. It's just as important to treat the customers of one store, you know, special as it is to if it was 20 stores. When you look at start looking at the 3D, some other things start coming into play. You see, you know, the ceiling treatments. You see, you know, how there's separators and breaks over here, and how we've created multiple seating areas. You know, some of the unique fixturing that creates a look and a feel of fresh and produce and all those things. And you also start getting a size of, or a sense of scale as to what's happening here as you go around the store. And you can see how the materials and the textures and everything create separation, but they also create cohesiveness going from one section to the other. And the natural light in this design is going to be great. And actually, it hasn't been done yet. It's in process. So just wait. And you asked a question, you know, about how many, but also the size. You know, that end market was a substantial. I think it was like 6,500 square foot, something like that. Well, this particular store is significantly less. You know, this is about, I can't see, it looks like about 3,000 square feet. So up in the Northeast, they don't have the big properties that you see in the Southeast. You know, they got a bunch of legacy sites that they really want to maximize. So we treat things a little different. And in this case, the same principles can be applied to a much smaller store. So we talked about multiple entrances. Well, we've got the multiple entrances. We talked about the flow. Some of the same principles are used where, you know, the coolers to the back, the restrooms to the back. They might not be as big a restrooms. There might not be as many cooler doors. You've got the adjacency of the beer cooler to the beer cave. You've got the flow back to the checkout. You've got the food service being in prime space. All of the same concepts have been used here, but in a very different way. It's a very different store. So the functional design of this particular one, it works, but it works in a much smaller space. So when you go outside of this particular store, all of the components are there, you know, whether it be the forecourt, you know, the Freshies logo, the signature, you know, Apple, some of the things that they've done, it really does work and work well. When you go inside, you start seeing when we start talking about the form, you start seeing some of the departments, some of the components, how we've brought that brand all the way through from the Hop-In Beer Cave to the Ice Maybe, which I just love that. I don't know why. I'm old, I guess. And I actually listened to Vanilla Ice back in the day. So when you look at the components here, it's very different from Inmark. I mean, the color palette's all different, the materials are all different, but it should be. It's a different store. You know, when you look at the eclectic, wood pattern here, and you look at the graphics, the way they're all coming together, it's just a different approach.
Mike, if you go back a slide to, I think it was Freshies.
Which one, the exterior or interior?
It showed the exterior and the interior.
There's the exterior.
There you
this
go.
One?
One forward or backward. But in any event, yeah, here we go. So here we got Freshies, and the outside is their brand, the inside is their brand. Kind of Sheets is that way, a lot of them. But if I'm a branded, say, fuel guy, and so I'm under agreement, I'm not going to be able to change from BP in the near term, but I want to create my own brand. Are there tips or tricks to do it when there's a mismatch? It's BP on the outside, but it's Freshies or me on the inside?
Yeah, if for business reasons and for contract reasons, whatever, the Freshies canopy that you see here was a Shell or a BP or Texaco or whoever, that's fine. Just don't let that come over to the retail side. And that goes back to treating those silos differently. So if your silo on the fuel is I'm a major brand player and that's the way I'm going to be, that's great. Go that route. But what you might also find is you'll have some of both. So one of your stores might be a BP and one of them might be a Freshies. If you're consistent in your approach on the retail, people will understand. They'll go to the Freshies store, and then you're a Freshies store that happens to have BP gas instead of a BP gas that happens to have a convenience store. So it's treating those silos separately and creating that uniqueness from one to the other is how you accomplish that. So when you get to the inside of the store, when you get to the 3D rendering rather, it all starts to come together, and some of those pieces start to come together in the look and the feel. And the way all those, you start seeing the lighting, some of the awnings and graphics and how it all comes together. And I love the way the fresh, I shouldn't say the freshness of it, but it is. It's got a fresh look, it's got a fun look. And when you start seeing inside, here's the actual store. And here's the actual inside. So, flat elevations don't ever give you the full play, but look at how every employee's got the uniforms on, how the Freshies look is so strong, how the brand has been brought down all the way to, the packaging, the freshness of the apples and oranges and such, and everything's prepared there. It's all fresh to go, as you can see. So they've done an excellent job of pulling it all together. And I guess the summary of it all is every customer is different, but you have to be intentional in how you not only create that brand, but how you execute the brand. And so every customer that we have is very different, and you go through an interview process to establish, okay, what makes you different? What is your brand promise? What look and feel and everything else is going to be unique to you? And then, as Jed was saying, how do you apply it? And that's, to me, the nuts and bolts of design today is you've got to be much more intentional than ever before. I think we've got some good time for some discussion. And I know you probably got some questions, Jed, as we're going along. You asked a few of them, but let's start a dialogue and see what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free to type anything into the dialog box there on your screen. And Mike, one question I have, it's a big investment to do what you're talking about, change the outside of a store, develop the new materials that you're going to use, the color palette, get the packaging right, the uniform right, all of that. What kind of return do you see from people that have instituted this? An uptick in sales? Do you have any hard numbers or that you can cite from your experience?
Yeah, I do. Some customers don't want me to share those numbers, and others are open to sharing. And I'll give you two examples. I believe one of them is a study group member, Douglas out of Sherman. We just finished a remodel with them, and they had, I believe, a 42%. I think it was 42%, but we actually did a video on it, and I can share that video with any members that would like it, where Bill Douglas talks about some of the increases. He talks about the increase in beer sales specifically when we did the things that we did. He talks about the overall increase in sales, and it's fascinating hearing it from his perspective. But that particular store, it was over 40%. We did another store previous to that that was 60%. So when you take a legacy site and you apply the principles that we're talking about, you will get a return. I'm not going to promise 40 or 60%, but I will promise a return.
Thanks. And a question from the audience, somebody asked, is digital media important in the stores, TVs, etc., rolling menu, advertising on the screen?
Absolutely it is. And taking it even beyond that, we had another customer, Qmart out of Austin, where we did a lot of digital media, not just the order systems, the order kiosk, the menu systems, but he embraced social media in a way I hadn't seen before, and it was so cool. You walk in and there's a big sign there with the Q, and he's got all these millennials in there doing selfies with the Q in the background. They send that in and get something free. They get a sandwich free or whatever it is. I forget exactly how he did it, but embracing technology is absolutely important for this next generation because they're all about it. When I go into customers that don't have free Wi-Fi, that don't offer, a place to sit, a place to, engage, I think it's a mistake.
And a question somebody else had, could you discuss the opportunities and challenges of building your food service program 100% grab and go rather than made to order?
Great question. I think a lot of people try to do the silver bullet approach where if I just do this, then that'll be great. And they try to skinny it down and they try to bring it, to a manageable level. And frankly, it's not always possible. But on the grab and go, if you're talking both hot and cold, you're still going through the same processes as far as quality of food, operations, cooking, etc. And again, I'm going to reference Qmart, which I do have a video on that I can share. And John, the executive chef of the entire chain, is interviewed on this particular video. And he talks about the percentage of sales. He offers both made to order, cold grab and go, and hot grab and go. And he says the number one amount of sales is out of the made to order. The number two is out of the hot grab and go. And he says the number three is the cold grab and go. And really, there were different customers, different day parts, and he gets into that a little bit. He talks about, how for them, it was a combination of all three. So it's not that you can't do just one. What I will say is that you may not have as much success. So you don't need to be a short order cook, but I think there's certain things that you need to do. But absolutely, if you're going to get into the food business, you need to have a competing brand approach. You need to look the part. You need to look the quality. And that's where the design, both functional and form design, makes sense.
Thanks, Mike. Another question, does a brand promise always need to be explicitly stated in your branding, i.e. fresh? And if it's not, how do you communicate your brand?
Right. Awesome questions. Boy, these are fantastic questions. And to me, it starts with actually having a brand promise. And I'm going to challenge the audience that when I go in and talk to customers and I ask that question, it seems pretty innocent enough, but very few people actually have the brand promise. So not only to have it, but do your employees even know what it is? Is it something that's reinforced internally? Is it something that, the ultimate driving machine? Okay, I'm pretty sure every employee at BMW knows that, probably wears it on their shirt. So the number one thing is to actually have it and enforce it with or embellish it with your employees. It does not have to be in the logo. It does not have to be, a tagline under every logo. In fact, sometimes it can be too much and too busy. So if you look at this, there's no tagline under end market or the eatery, but the brand is reinforced in both cases. And as you go in, it's reinforced in a different way on labeling and packaging and uniforms than it is out here. So I think I answered the question. It does not have to be everywhere, but it has to mean something and everyone has to agree. Every employee has to know what it is and promote it.
And I think a concern could be that you're making brand promises either good or bad unintentionally. And so making sure you understand what those are.
Yeah, and maybe the worst thing is to make a brand promise and not keep it. Sometimes we get a little inflated on who we think we are, and we're not there yet. So as part of all this is behind the scenes, is your menu up to snuff? Are you presenting it in the right way? Do you have the right operational, not only efficiencies, but controls, to offer that high quality food, to present it in the correct way? Not only what is it, but are you actually doing it?
And Mike, a different question here is, how do you blend a national QSR drive-through window with non-QSR products like beer through the same window?
You cannot do it through the same window. Now, we've done stores where there's multiple drive-throughs, where you have one drive-through on one side of the store and one through the other. But if you have, say a McDonald's or whatever, you cannot have, or Subway even, you can't put your products through that window. So the choices are, A, only have one window, B, have multiple windows. And that's a decision that sometimes is made just by what the physical limitations are on a site, and then sometimes it's just a preference.
So 2 windows.
Yeah, we've done multiple windows, and it's a challenge because you've got different traffic patterns. It really can be a difficult challenge, but it's doable.
Well, thanks, Mike. Those were the questions that we had from the audience. I will say I will send out to everybody on the call the slides here, as well as Mike's contact information. And I know Mike would be more than happy to follow up and answer any other individual questions that people have. So feel free to take advantage of that opportunity with Mike. And Mike, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to help us out here. The brand decision is a big one for all of us, and as the industry is evolving, I think brand is playing, or private brand is playing a bigger place here in the industry that we all need to adapt to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate your time, Keith, Mike, and thank you everybody for being on the call, and hope you have a great day and found this valuable.
And I can make those videos available as well if you'd like.
Yeah, let's do that.
The ones that I referenced.
I think there's interest in people.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll send you a link to forward to the teams, the different study group members.
Terrific. Thanks, Mike. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.